As I mentioned, we're in the season of Epiphany, and we'll be looking at all of these different stories that come to us through the lens of choices. It seems we always have to make a choice about something. And sometimes we feel like we don't have any choice. So I didn't have any choice. We always have a choice. The problem is sometimes we have a choice between something we don't like and something we don't like. Something that's not good and not good. So we always have a choice. Sometimes the choice is clear. Sometimes it's crystal clear that this is what we need to do or say or be. And other times it's less clear. Other times there's two things that either one would be equally good in the situation. And so we have to weigh out pros and cons and think about it and how we're going to make that choice. And like I said, sometimes there are two choices that you think, well, you know, they're equally bad or equally distasteful, so we have to choose one. And all through the Bible, all through the Old Testament and the New Testament, we see story after story after story of men and women, just like you and I, who were constantly faced with these choices. And it's always easy to look back and say, well, that was a good choice, or oh, that was a really bad choice. Probably you've done that sometimes in your own life. I know I've certainly done it. Look back on things and say, shit, you know what, only I'd gone such and such, would have made a different choice. But the reality is, at the time that we have to make a choice, we have the information we have that finite amount. We can always make good choices with 20/20 hindsight. It's always easy to look back and say, well, you know, that was a good choice or a bad choice. And so oftentimes over the years, people would come to me for support or care, counseling, and they'd say to me, Kathy, you know, I made such a bad choice, how could I have done that? And then I say to them, well, what was the information you had at the time? Did it feel like a good choice at the time? Yeah, it felt like the best choice. Then I say, well then go forward. We can only make the choice with the information we have at the time, or the feelings that we have at the time. And I think most of us, unless we're extremely twisted, I think most of us make the best choices we can at the time. And then we just have to go forward and live with that. And nor was that more to be seen than when Jesus was calling his first disciples. Because they had a choice. Sometimes we think that it was very clear-cut and very, Jesus said, come and follow me. Oh, okay, sure. But each one, as we look more in depth at these stories, and we'll see more over the next couple of weeks, that it wasn't quite that clear-cut. In this story we read this morning from John's Gospel, these two individuals, Simon, who was renamed Peter, and Andrew, decided to follow Jesus. They'd already been with John the Baptist. And John said to them, look, I'm not the real thing. I'm not the real deal. This person is the one that really has come. This is the one you need to be following. And they immediately went and followed Jesus. Now I think as we look at that, clearly there was trust. So that if John the Baptist was endorsing somebody else, these two individuals would think, hey, you know what? If John says he's a good guy and he's the real thing, then we trust that and we have to go and follow Jesus. It really speaks powerfully to that whole sense of being a model, being a mentor, a role model. And I think that so often, especially with young people, what they see and learn is not what we tell them, but what we show them, so that how we live and what we do speaks volumes, doesn't it? So that whole sense of being able to model what it is we say we're about, because those lessons speak so loudly. So here we have two individuals who changed. We don't know a lot of details about them, but changed their life to then go with Jesus because of that trust, that modeling that John had already done. It's true, isn't it? That we have a lot of sort of cliche sayings, but a lot of them are really true. Birds of a feather flock together, for example, is one of the sayings that we use quite often. And so when we watch somebody and we see the kinds of people that they draw around them, it then speaks of that person, at least one aspect of their life. And so if we trust somebody and we trust the kinds of people that they will attract, then that's one way of sort of seeing what's going on. So these two individuals had been following John the Baptist, and clearly he had brought something new. He was a little bit different, a little bit quirky, out in the desert, and sort of saying before Jesus, come on, now we all have to change. There's big change coming. And sometimes when somebody is announcing a big change, we either discredit them, or it must be out of your mind, or we get very frightened. And it's hard sometimes to find that middle road to say, okay, this might be happening, so I need to prepare, but I need to not totally freak out at the same time, because especially nowadays with the internet and social media, there's always somebody on a platform telling us something's going to happen or change or whatever. It's different before this time, but now when you think about it, any of us can have a platform to say anything. So that kind of discernment becomes a little bit more tricky. So this time it was a little bit easier because most things were face-to-face, and it was the world was a much smaller place. It was really centered around Tigers and Euphrates rivers, so a very small geographic area. But these two individuals decided that they would follow Jesus. Now, again, we don't know everything. We know what's given to us, but they didn't really know what they were getting themselves into. And so again, we can look on it and say, how could you kind of just give up everything to go and follow this person who really didn't know? But when you think about it, probably every one of us does that, especially when we're young. You know, we launch into a career. Do we really know what we're getting ourselves into when we say we want to be a doctor, teacher, minister, farmer, whatever it is? We know at that time that we feel passionate about something. And so this is the right thing. But, my goodness, do any of us know, can we just project 30, 40 years down the line, what that's going to involve? No, we can't. So we enter that with passion, and then faith grows into that. I was talking to one of my colleagues at conference, this is a few years ago. We had been classmates at Queen's, and I said to her, her name is Kathy as well, and I said, you know, Kathy, I feel like the job you and I were trained for doesn't even exist anymore. And she said, Kathy, it doesn't. And we realized that all the churches and the ways that when we first trained for the ministry, churches were full, and we were building churches every week, every month, somewhere in heaven. And now that's changed, but what hasn't changed is that men and women and children are still spiritually hungry and looking for faith and looking for a way to believe, looking for answers to big questions. And so we may be doing it differently, and we may be called to do different things along the line, but that's life. And I think every one of you would say the same thing about whatever it is that you're doing for your life's work. Things have changed for you over the years, I'm sure, and for you, Carl. All, Scott, we make all those changes because we're going to change it. So I think about when you got married, some of you that have been long-term marriages. You enter into this marriage with somebody. Did you really know, stretching ahead, what was going to unfold? I doubt it. If we did, how many of us would decide to do anything? We'd sort of be sitting, being paralyzed. But that's the whole way that life works. Like I said, we have to make a choice. Every day we have to choose to get up or not get up. We have to choose what we're going to wear. We have to choose if we're going to engage with the world. And so these people made a choice to follow Jesus. It was their calling, it was their passion. And when we're called, when we're passionate about something, when we're called to something, and it doesn't just mean, we tend to think calling is just a religious vocation, but we're all called to different things at different points in our life. And sometimes we're called, recently, as you know, in the last several years, I was called to do a lot of caregiving for elderly parents. And so I had to rearrange some of my priorities to free up the time to do that at that particular time. Was it convenient? No. Was it at the right time? No. Never is. But it had to happen. And so we learn to make other choices because that's presenting itself and that has to happen at that time. And so life is really a series of these constant changes, constantly looking at today and saying, what do I need to do today? I'm not worrying about tomorrow or next year or 10 years from now, because who knows what kind of a world we'll even be living in. We don't. So these two people knew at that time that that's what they needed to do. They needed to follow Jesus. It was a burning kind of passion with them, and for whatever reason, they signed up. They didn't know how long it was going to be. Was it going to be a lifetime? Well, it wasn't a lifetime because Jesus' ministry only lasted 3 years. And then they had to watch in agony as their leader was brutally crucified. And then what? Then they had to make another choice about what the next thing would be. And so, as St. Augustine once said, my heart is restless until it finds its rest in thee. When God calls us to something, we can make another choice. We can say, no, I don't do this right now. This isn't convenient to me. But our heart is absolutely restless. When I was confronted with the reality that would come, that I would have to step up and do a fair amount of period for my mom, I was recovering at the time from some really, really serious spine surgery that I didn't know if I was going to walk again. And it was kind of like, what are we going to do here? But it worked out because you just take one step at a time. It was clear that I needed to make that choice. My mom was only at the end of her life. And that was an opportunity that if I didn't grab onto it, it would be over and it would never be back. And so somehow, in sort of the chaos of all that was going on in my own life, that became really clear. And so having to make choices, some were very difficult choices, to be able to be in that position. And so I could have said, well, sorry, but I'll have to get somebody else because I just thought I'm not healthy enough right now. It's convenient, it's intruding. Or to just say, this has to happen. My heart's restless, and until I put this in God's hands and ask for advice, my heart will be restless too. So, call is not this mysterious thing that, I used to think when I was a little girl and I'd be in church and when I was a teenager, young adult, and these ministers would talk in this very somber tone about somebody who received this call. And I think, why did I got a hotline to heaven? And then realizing that it's not a hotline to anything, it's just paying attention to what's going on right there, right in your well-being, and understanding that we try to, we always try to divide our mind from our body, but they work together. We know that. And if something's wrong in our body, it shows up in our mind. If something's wrong in our mind, our spirit is going to show up in our body. So just paying attention to that and being aware of that. And those little nudges, those little, you're on a bus and because the car broke down and you're really annoyed because you can't get it fixed today, you've got to take the bus and you haven't done that for a while. And then you bump into somebody on the bus that says something, you don't even know this person. And you're mulling over that and thinking, when did that happen? Well, that happened because it needed to happen. Somehow we needed to be in that spot to hear something that triggers us. So one of the things that I've done, because I used to drive myself almost, all the bend, trying to make choices and different things. Did you say, what life happens around this? We do the best we can each moment of the day and let it go. And my life has gotten so much easier. So I encourage you to simply pay attention to what's happening in your body. Frederick Buechner, who's a Presbyterian minister and very prolific writer, wrote an elegant on that. He says, pay attention to your own life. Because as your life is unfolding, God is speaking through that, and you'll know what you need to do. You'll know what the right thing is to do,